Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Thank you for joining us. Adjust my mic volumes there. It's been an interesting day, I suppose. So we have breaking news. The state of Michigan is under a state of emergency. 3 dams have broken. They broke at 10 p.m. last night, about 5 hours ago. The rupture at this point is endangering the town of Midland of 42,000 people. The governor has said that she is expecting as much as 9 feet of water there within 12 to 15 hours of the break, which again was 5 hours ago. So we're looking at, all right. So at any rate, if you want to know more about that, that's in our previous video. We do have there in that description links to shelters. If you are listening to this and you don't know for a fact that you are safe, you need to stop this broadcast and go find out whether or not you are in a safe place. Don't assume it. If you're anywhere in Michigan, anywhere near that area, you need to go find out if you're going to be okay. The flooding, it looks like, is going to displace as many as 100,000 people. 3,000 buildings are already affected, and the Dow chemical plant on the river, one of the rivers down stream of one of the breaks, is obviously in jeopardy and looks like is going to be submerged. That particular facility has a 300 kilowatt nuclear reactor at it. We don't know what other chemicals they have, but that's obviously a concern. So we are hoping, I was worried about the volume there, so let me see if, you guys let me know how that volume is. Something seems to have, I think I know, oh boy. All right, reset the system, and then we end up here. So with any luck, that will improve things. If the volume is still an issue, let me know. After the breaking news, this was going to be saved. We pushed this back to this morning, but technically it's this morning. So the news update on the coronavirus and sort of what's going on in this country so far. The CDC's aggregate of national forecasts has placed the death toll now at somewhere between 100,000 and 125,000 deaths by June 1st. At least one forecast says it's going to be as high as 150,000 deaths. One issue is that this is using numbers of projections based on confirmed cases. The problem is we don't know how many cases are actually there because we in this country have not been testing as much as we'd like. So my hope is that, and there are different models that actually don't go by that, so that's not entirely fair. That's just the aggregate has it between 100 and 125,000. But that's at least, it's better than it could be, I suppose. So hopefully that's going to remain steady, because they keep having to project those upwards as we learn more and more and more. All forecasts do unfortunately show it. If you watch the projections, you can see that the projections started going up like this, and then they started flattening out like this. And as they flattened out, it's like, okay, great, because it's a exponential growth. Started to flatten out, and then now all of the projections have the death rates going back up again and starting to accelerate. We don't want to get back into a full, just into the heart of that logarithmic growth. I see that as being kind of hard to avoid. 49 out of 50 states have now fully or partially reopened. The most recent one is Massachusetts. Moderna's new COVID vaccine is in its stage 1 trials. It appears to be having good results. At least 8 patients, or 8 of the trial participants, I should say, have apparently developed the antibodies that are necessary to fight off the COVID vaccine. Further, South Korea has reported that a number of people there who had tested positive and had COVID-19 have maintained the antibodies and appear at this point to be immune to further infections. For how long that is, nobody knows, but at this point they appear to have full immunity for at least some period of time. South Korea is so confident in these results that they are now actually saying that anyone who has been confirmed to have been infected with COVID-19 is free to ignore the lockdown status and go wherever they choose without having to worry about social distancing or any other measures. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has said that he is taking the drug hydrochloroquine, which he says he is taking in order to proactively fight off infection. This move has been universally condemned by the medical community and seen as reckless and dangerous. One, there is no evidence, none, that hydrochloroquine has any efficacy combating COVID-19. The only evidence was anecdotal evidence of a French study. We covered that study on In Time here, and why that study was hogwash, and a white paper on COVID-19 written by a PhD in biochemistry who hadn't been in a lab for 20 years and was now working as a consultant in a cryptocurrency startup, and a lawyer. They did a white paper on why COVID-19 was reliable and worked great. That paper used data not from COVID, but from malaria, and said, well, they're similar. They're like 80% similar. So hey, you can do that. Humans and chimpanzees are 98% similar. You think you can make those kinds of comparisons? No honest medical professional would ever do that white paper is worthless. That appears to be what Donald Trump, and it misrepresents all. We covered this, and we covered this. We'll get into when we covered this. We covered this. We did a full breakdown of what was wrong with that paper 2 days before Trump was made aware of that paper and decided, oh, it's real, and actually started to go run with it publicly. At any rate, he is now, according to himself, self-medicating against doctors' advice. He is giving people the impression that his instincts on this drug working is far better than the results of clinical evidence and test results and clinical evidence, and he is serving as a model for people who would like to ignore sound medical advice in the future. He's also claimed that hydrochloroquine is safe and said, quote, what has been determined is that it doesn't harm you. That's strange, because it's long been known that this is an extraordinarily toxic drug. It's so toxic that it could never be approved by the FDA by today's standards. It couldn't be approved for any use in any capacity. One of the problems is it messes with your heart rhythm. It throws your heart off rhythm. It elongates your EP cycles. It changes the EP length, and it is extraordinarily dangerous. And they do tests of these kinds of drugs in dogs first, and when they detected that in dogs, couldn't get within 10 miles of getting approved by the FDA. It was approved before the FDA had these regulations in place. It is that toxic. He's saying, well, it's been determined that it doesn't harm you. The side effects, the known side effects listed by the manufacturer, who, by the way, is, well, I'll get to that. The known side effects range from blistering and peeling of skin, fast pounding and uneven heartbeat, paranoia, hallucinations, fever, swollen throat, loss of hearing, sudden and permanent loss of eyesight, and, I'm not kidding here, quote, no pulse or blood pressure. That's called death. It actually says no pulse or blood pressure. The reason they say this is because they're required to list all of the side effects, and death is a side effect of this drug. It's not a side effect of Tylenol. It's a side effect. of this one. But people try not to take drugs that say side effect includes death. So the manufacturer has decided to say, quote, no pulse or blood pressure. That's the medicine that his gut tells him is safe and that he's taking. Yeah. I don't think he's taking it. In fact, I have no doubt in my mind he's not taking it. Of course he's not taking it. First of all, if he was taking it, he would be sick as a dog. We interviewed somebody who had been taking it, made them sick as hell. Nobody in their right minds would take this if they didn't have to. It's prescribed to people for malaria. And it would be illegal for any doctor to prescribe it to him off-label like this, and he's the president of the United States. Do you remember what happened to Michael Jackson's doctor when he prescribed I've forgotten the name, sorry, the propofol off-label just to help him sleep? Do you remember what happened to that doctor? Now you're talking about somebody with every doctor, every biochemist who can read and who looks at this and who looks at the data knows that this is toxic. And a doctor's going to prescribe it for him or let him have it. What happens if he dies from this? And it's sudden death and sudden blindness. The person we had on who had it had to get his eyesight checked every few months on the off chance they might be able to catch it right before he goes blind if it's going to start to happen. But the reality is, and he was told this, he could wake up one day and he can't ever see again for the rest of his life. That's hydrochloroquine, which this president is saying, oh, it's been determined that there isn't a study anywhere that said that this is safe. He's not taking it. He's doing what a 12-year-old is doing, which is he wants to encourage people to believe what he doesn't want to be seen the fool. He was dead wrong about this drug. He was dead wrong about it, and it was obvious at the time he did it. But he kept sitting out, it's optimistic and couldn't hurt. Yeah, it could hurt, but rather than say he was dead wrong, it's I'm taking it because. Doesn't care about the consequences. Doesn't care about the people who are going to actually believe him and start trying to take it. Okay. He's also saying that anybody who objects to him taking the drug is doing so only because they don't like him or for political reasons. That's the only reason. The FDA in April said that this drug was so dangerous nobody should ever take it outside of a hospital setting. Again, principally what they were most concerned about was the erratic heartbeat, and they said it could kill you. So you had to be monitored while taking this drug. Hook you up to an EKG and just keep an eye on you. Other than that, don't. And that was in April. The FDA said this. There was a study that has now been completed. It was completed, I think, it's a preliminary study done by the U.S. Veterans Health Administration for veterans who have had COVID-19. And the conclusion was as follows. The death rate for people without the hydrochloroquine at the VA, their death rate was 11%. Patients at the VA who were taking hydrochloroquine were dying at 28%. That's more than double by taking this drug. And of course that's doing it. It doesn't help against the COVID-19, and it's toxic. If you give toxic drugs to somebody who is already battling a life-threatening why not just give them arsenic? That was thought to be a medicine at one point. Let's just by Trump's analogy, let's give them arsenic. Couldn't hurt, right? Trump then said that that particular study was invalid because, quote, because it only because that study was invalid because they, quote, only gave the drug to very sick people, extremely sick people. The test on whether or not hydrochloroquine helps cure people of COVID is invalid because they only gave it to people who have COVID. I'm going to retire. I think anybody looking to host a YouTube channel, one's opening up because at this point civilization's done. Okay. I'm going to try to. He's also said that he is considering permanently withholding funding from the World Health Organization and withdrawing the United States from the World Health Organization. He is doing this because he blames them for misreporting the numbers from China. However, they did report the numbers from China. However, what they said was that these were only the reports from China, and they did not testify as to the authenticity of these reports. They just said these are the reports from China. Only one administration official actually said that the numbers from China were real and they were legit and that they were good. That was President Donald Trump. He is the only one who said that the Chinese numbers were good. Okay. Trump has also now said that the high cases of COVID in the United States is a badge of honor. He is proud of that. He's proud of it because he says what it really means is that the United States has been doing more testing. He said, quote, actually the number of cases, and we're also a much bigger country than most, so when we have a lot of cases, I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that as, in a certain respect, is a good thing because it means our testing is better. That's one thing it could mean. It could mean that. If Italy has only 5 cases and only 5 tests, and they test those 5 people, and okay, they have 5 cases, there you go. They have 100% of their cases tested. We could have 1/5 of our cases tested. So it doesn't mean that the numbers are down. You don't know what it means about the numbers. All you can do is say what it means about the testing. The actual, unless you're testing 100% of the population, there's no way to know. I will say this. Almost every other almost every other industrialized nation on the planet is ahead of us in testing. So I don't know why he says, in terms of as a percentage of population, we're behind. We're behind every other country. And having tested a smaller percentage of our people than just about any other country in the world, we have now 29% of the COVID cases. We have only 4% of the population. 4% of the world lives in this country. 30% of the COVID cases live in this country. And because we're testing fewer people as a percentage of our population than those other countries, the number's got to be bigger than that. It has to be. It can't not be, because unless we happen to have, by luck, tested only the people who've got it and all the people who've got it, there's a lot more who have it. And the way I know this is because there's more in other countries, and we know that because they're testing better than we are. That's a fact. That's not up for... There is no organization on the planet that refutes that. Not even his own White House. Just Trump disagrees with those numbers. And it's that kind of attitude that's getting people killed, because they say, oh, it's safe to go back out again. If we decide as a country we really want to open up, fine. But let's make that decision based on truth, based on what the numbers are, based on what the economy is, based on what we know, not based on he's deciding for all of us that he thinks the economy should open, and he will lie to us to get us to feel comfortable doing it. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that's what he's doing. I think he's lying to protect his own ego, to protect his own fragility and the fact that he can't admit to ever being wrong about anything. And he's really screwed up a lot here. Because that's the other thing, which is when people say, why are we behind on testing? He says, oh, that's the Obama administration. Then when people say, well, how do you feel about the numbers? Well, I feel okay about the numbers because the reality is we're testing more than any other country in the world. You can't have it both ways. But he has it both ways depending on who's asking and when. But even if he wasn't doing this to cover himself, but was doing this because he wanted to help the country open, I think we deserve to know the truth. The Republicans who voted for them are also, in large part, the same number of people who I found are always going around. I'd really like to have a president who tells the truth, a politician who tells the truth. The ones who tell the truth don't get elected. I vote for the ones who tell the truth. That's why I know what it's like to lose. They don't want a president. They want to win more than they want a president who's going to tell them the truth. But you can't make good decisions unless you're being told the truth. And none of what he's saying is true. So even if you grant that he's doing it for the right reasons, it's still the wrong thing to do. People deserve to know what we're looking at in this country, what drugs work. People have already died because they followed his advice. When he said that we should look into ingesting household cleaners, the city of New York had, I think, if I recall correctly, on average, 15 calls a year from people who had ingested household cleaners by accident, poison control, calling poison control for accidental ingesting of household cleaners. The day after he said that, 57 people did. And you can sit there and say, well, gee, and I can hear the Republican, thought, oh, I thought, everyone in the liberal cities are supposed to be smart. Shouldn't they have known better? They're desperate. They're dying. And they're not all smart. And they're not all dying. No state is any one thing. But you put a whole bunch of panicked people watching everybody around them dying, and the President of the United States said, let's look into ingesting household cleaners. And that's what he said. It's only when he realized just how dumb it was like, oh, I was making a joke. Am I the only one to observe that most of his behavior is around the 12-year-old level? And I'm not, it just is. Oh, I was making a joke? So, yeah, we don't know what the numbers are, but we are testing fewer people as a percentage of our population than most any other country. We did have, and just as I was sort of preparing this, there was some other interesting news. There is an archdiocese in Texas, the Archdiocese of Galveston and Houston, has now shut its doors. The reason it's shutting its doors, in Texas, churches were declared an emergency service, so they did not have to close. So they've been open. 5 members of the church, 5 of the ministers. I don't know if they're all ministers, so I should apologize. 5 of the I've been streaming since. I'm a little tired, so I do apologize. But 5 people who work at the church have tested positive for COVID, and one of their ministers has died. They don't know from what, but what we do know is when he died, the others got tested, and 5 have tested positive. So upon hearing this, the Archdiocese of Galveston and Houston has decided to close its doors until further notice. This gets into the argument that I think a lot of us have been making for a while, which is, why bother? Why are you closing your doors now? If you're closing your doors now to save lives, well, it's too late. The doors have been open and everybody's been getting sick. You were supposed to close before this point. This is why we're almost certainly going to face a second lockdown. The idea is that we have to save our economy, and so human lives are worth it. But if COVID does have the 3.7 mortality rate, was the last figure that I saw, 3.7 mortality rate. And if 20% of Americans get it, which according to the CDC, it will stay until 70% get it, because that's where we get herd immunity. But if only 20% get it at the 3.7% rate that the CDC has, that is I think that's 2 million Americans dead. 2 million. What do you think that's going to do to the economy? Has anyone considered what that does in terms of the jobs lost, in terms of the positions that aren't getting filled, in terms of the damage to the infrastructure because people aren't doing their work, and in terms of consumers, which is what most of them are actually worried about? When the numbers start to get that high, they're going to do a second lockdown and say, well, we have to protect the economy. Well, if you had finished the first lockdown and done it right the first time, you wouldn't have to do that. And that's where this church is right now. Now that people are dying, they're saying, oh, shoot, now we should close. If they had closed beforehand, they could be closed for the same period of time, but do it before anybody gets sick, and then nobody gets sick and dies later on. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. Staying open, waiting until people are dying, and then closing is too late. And now that they're closed, it's still a 2-week lag time before they start to see just how many people get sick, because that's the period of time between when you take an action and you see the consequences of that action. So when you open up, it'll be 2 weeks before you see the effects of that. When you lock down, it'll be 2 weeks before you see the effect of that. We're not going to know what's going to happen with them for at least 2 weeks until after that lockdown. But they're concerned enough that they've decided they're going to shut that down. And last, and I do apologize, I did have this up, and now I appear to have, we had one other thing that I wanted to get to, and I'm going to see if I can, there it is. So, we had one more interesting thing, and I don't, this is going to be turning into dump on Trump night, which I don't necessarily try to do, but he's killing a lot of people, and he's doing a lot of things that are just completely and 100% unethical, immoral, and you can't. Republicans like to say, and I do hold Republicans largely responsible, because they could have gone for Mitt Romney or Mike Pence or anybody else, and they picked Trump. They like to say that they're for our troops, and anyone who doesn't agree with any of their policies is against our troops. The Trump administration has ordered a end to deployment, a hard stop to deployment on June 24th of all National Guard. So, or all the ones, I should say, all the ones that were deployed specifically for helping as of his, what was it, May 12th? That he activated on May 12th. Why that date? Well, because that is 1 day short of when most of them would become eligible for benefits such as education. Well, actually, any of the, so let's see, it's early retirement, education benefits, and any part of the 9/11 GI Bill. So, if you are serving this country right now in the National Guard, if you are doing your job, if you are doing it well, the Trump administration has decided that the day before they are required to help you get an education, before they are required to keep up their end of the deal, they're going to do a forced stop so they don't have to. Politico obtained a recording from the Trump administration, which it says came, in which they claim that the administration says, quote, "We would greatly benefit from a unified message regarding the conclusion of their service prior to hitting the 90-day mark and retirement benefit implications associated with it. In this meeting, they said that it had come directly from Trump himself, who had ordered that they all be stopped immediately before they are entitled to their benefits. This isn't a business. This is the National Guard. This is our military. My suspicion is the Republicans are going to completely support this because they don't care, that I can tell, about the values. I shouldn't say that because there are plenty that do. Actually, that's really gross. Apologize again. Very tired. There are many who don't care about the values they espouse. So, they say they're for smaller government, except when they're in office, then all of a sudden government budgets explode. Almost every Democratic president has lowered the budget. Almost every Republican, actually every Republican one, has increased the budget. Only president ever to balance the budget, a modern president, Bill Clinton. He was a liberal. And they're for the military, except during a time of war, at least according to the president, when they're serving us, we'll make sure that they get cut off before they get their benefits. If you're not outraged by that, if you're a Republican and not outraged by that, I think some self-examination may not be a bad idea. Anyways, that is our news update for today, and thank you all for joining us. For many of you, the second time today, but we appreciate you guys joining us, and we will, as usual, stay abreast of what's going on. And I'm sorry to say, I'm sure there's going to be more in the next couple of days. Until then, my name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and this has been In Time. Thank you.